You're listening to The Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm your host, Amy Stone. Here, I share stories from real people navigating the adventure that I call adulting. Are you ready? Me too. Let's do this. Stephanie Shanks, welcome to Imperfect Adulting.
Oh my gosh, Amy, thank you so much for having me today.
I'm happy to be here with you. Are you ready for a fun chat?
I am. I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the topic you pitched to me is talking about how you learned or how you are learning to live a life free of people pleasing. So I want to start there. I want to have you share how and when you realized that you were even doing that.
Um, I realized I was doing it when I turned 40, actually. I was pretty oblivious until that point. I had built this life based on what I thought it should look like to other people. I had a nice home. My husband, who's now my ex-husband, we had three businesses and, you know, uh, white picket fence, all of it. And I was just so miserable. And I thought I just kept digging and digging, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy? Why can't I just be happy? And, the more I I dug, I stopped thinking about what was I doing wrong and for whatever reason, it just started switching, like, what am I doing right?
Okay.
And that little bit of confidence, that spark, that question of, hmm, maybe there's more to what I'm doing right than there's what there is to doing wrong.
All right. Very good. So to recap, did you actually have a picket fence?
At one point, yeah, the last
Okay.
house had a it was a huge Victorian with a wraparound porch,
Okay.
like,
And an
yeah, it was,
actual picket fence, not just the metaphorical picket fence, but an actual picket fence.
yeah, the house before that had a white picket fence. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very cool. I've had fences, but never a white picket fence. So
Hmm.
I think that people pleasing, is very common. And there is a thing to say there, which is that that can be true, especially among women. But that is actually a topic for another day and probably somebody else's podcast.
Yeah.
But if you think back to the version of you before you realized you were people pleasing, what are some of the ideas and beliefs and assumptions that you may have had about yourself?
W- When I go back and think about that time before the aha moment, I thought that everything that was going wrong within a relationship, within a friendship, within a business, uh, somebody trips at the coffee shop and I'm there to witness it. I thought it was my fault that I had done something wrong. Um, and I was giving myself to all these things that had nothing to do with me. I had friendships that were based on what I could do for other people and relationships, my business. I was afraid to charge what I needed to have a successful business because I was afraid people are going to be mad at me. Everything I did, every decision I made was based on what I felt the person in front of me was going to perceive me as. So my identity was in other people.
Your identity was in other people. And do you have any idea where that came from? Like way, way back? Have you done that like kind of origin work? Like where did this story start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been there, but where I like to start the story is when I was 16, I got pregnant and had twin boys. And that feeling of I really messed up and now I have to fix this problem resonated really deeply, really traumatically right from day one with that. But I mean, I'm sure it's always been there.
That is one of those stories, right? So I think I'm older than you. I'm in my 50s. That is one of those stories that teen pregnancy will, destroy your life. And imagine my surprise when I got to be an adult and I met a bunch of people who had gone through that, who had amazing lives. They had, not they had families that had supported them and they had done all the things that I had been told would be casualties of that event. And so I was like, wow, maybe, maybe this song that's been singing in my head wasn't exactly the way it had to go. So, but I just want to validate that I think that that is a cultural story that is really hard to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really hard thing to overcome without all the stigma and judgment.
100%, 100%. No, that and that's real. We can tell ourselves, sticks and stones don't break our bones, but it hurts when you are walking through life knowing that people are making judgments about you and that you have to wake up every day and, make it through.
Yeah, yeah, and I was constantly trying to prove myself through actions and things to other
Yeah.
people, and trying to outrun that feeling of shame and inadequacy.
Yeah. Hard to run away from yourself.
Yeah, I really tried a few times, a
And
few different marriages, different homes, different, you know.
yeah.
It's funny because I thought, happiness was having a car with a sunroof at one point. Like, oh, if I just had a sunroof.
And here's the thing. So I live in South Florida, right? So I've had convertibles and all the cars now come with sunroofs and things like that. But um it's the sun coming in through the top is not always as comfortable as you think it would be. It's like you end up with like sunglasses and a hat and it's hot.
Too hot.
It's
Yeah.
too hot. It's too hot. And so convertible weather is really, when you're willing to, and you have to make the sacrifice in Florida. I will be with the top open and the air conditioning on because when you stop at the stoplight and the sun is blazing on you, it's hot. It's hot. It's not as comfortable. If every day could be like a mountain drive with perfect weather and the top down, that would be fun. But
Yeah.
no. All right, so let's talk about making the change, right? So you realize in your 40s, and I will say, I think it's very interesting to me how some of these awareness points they align with those benchmarks. Like I always crack myself up. We talked before we hit record about synchronicities, and I do smile at life when they're like, oh, welcome to 40, welcome to 45, welcome to 35. And you're like, wow, I was paying attention to the textbook because this is when I'm seeing this. But let's talk about what it actually means to make the change, because that is a combination of words that can sometimes be confusing to people who haven't gone through it. What was involved for you? In making the change and how you interacted with the people in your life to be less of a people pleaser.
So there is so many different parts to this. Uh, And again, the synchronicity, everything kind of lined up exactly how it was supposed to. But I went through menopause early. I was going to doctors and going through hot flashes and waking up sweaty, not sleeping, anxiety, all the things. And I knew I was going through it, but nobody believed me.
How old
And
were
it's,
you?
I was like 37 at the time that I
Okay,
started.
so early, early. Okay.
Yeah, and nobody believed me. The doctors didn't believe me. And it was at that point I kind of started trusting my body a little bit. So that was one part of it where it's like, okay, I guess the people that I thought were gonna help me aren't going to help me. So I had to learn, started going to acupuncture. I was doing videography randomly with a herbologist, and she was giving me herbs to take, tea and all this stuff, and really just learning about my body for the first time at 37, even after having kids. Um, and then my marriage, I had four stepkids and three of my own, and they kind of all started growing up and moving away, and left with this really big empty house and a lot of quiet space and time to think and analyzing my life. It was during COVID as well. So, um, really started digging into self-help and judgment against self. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like that was, I had no idea judgment was a choice. I didn't know that the thoughts in our head, you could change them. Blew my mind. I just thought there was something wrong with me because that's what the voices are always telling me. And so I kind of started this divide, and you feel free to interrupt me at any time. But I started almost to divide myself into two parts. I had my photography business, my photography studio, this creative. piece of me. I was learning to grow my business, learning to charge what I needed to charge, and social media presence, all this stuff. And then I had my home life where I just felt like I was ignored. I didn't have a voice. I almost felt just like I was a lamp on on a table. I just, this contrast just started, and I was just like, oh, I want to keep this together. I want to keep this together. Obviously, I'm doing something wrong. Um, so I came up with this bright idea that I should spend 6 months in California and 6 months in Wisconsin, and I can have both my lives. I can have my life with my husband, and then I can have my super creative life. And so I went to Santa Barbara for a month to try it out. And within a day or two of being in Santa Barbara, making my own decisions, going to yoga, meditation, I'm like, oh, I can't keep myself in this little box anymore back home. And
Oh
that's
my
when I
God.
knew. Yeah.
Oh my God. So, all right. So I have so many follow-up questions. But first, I want to tell you, you and I have some things in common that you may not know.
Okay, let's hear
One
it.
of those is I'm a stepmom.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was a stepmom before I was a mom. So I'm the wifey number two, and I married somebody who had kids. So I've walked that walk. And the second one is that you're a photographer and you're still working as a photographer, and I am a retired photographer. So for years, for about a decade, I owned a portrait studio where I did babies and kids and weddings. So I have done that. And one of the things when I was thinking about this interview, one of the things that I thought was so interesting about that piece of it is that that's client work, right? Like the piece that is people pleasing, of identifying other people's desires and needs, that's like what you need to do as a successful photographer, right? So you've got a family that comes in and the dad has male pattern baldness. You do not highlight that in his family photo or he's not going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a thing. So I'm interested to know whether or not you made that distinction, like that division in your thinking about like, this is when it's okay for me to really look at people's wants and needs and desires. And this is how I separate it from my own self-confidence and strength and my inner voice.
I did, but it's actually pretty recent that I understood that my job uh was separate from me. I think that's what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. And also your job, you are separate from your job, and also that sometimes our strengths can be our weaknesses. They can be the same thing. The thing that makes you very good at something in one part of your life can be the part that helps you dig yourself into a hole.
Yeah.
So like if you have a really strong work ethic,
Yeah.
yay. But also you might be prone to be a workaholic. You're
People pleasing
really,
and low
yeah.
boundaries. Yeah.
People pleasing and no boundaries. Huh? So then, all right. So you at this point in your story, you're in Wisconsin. Did I get that right? Wisconsin?
Yeah. Yep.
Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and you go to the a freaking beautiful city of Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And you find yourself saying, "Oh, actually, I can just take myself to yoga and be very happy with this decision." Sometimes people call this the awakening, right?
Yeah.
So how much of your life did you burn down? Like, did you like leave the Midwest and go to the coast?
Um, I tried, but it didn't quite work out that way. My husband at the time came and visited, and I had that really hard conversation where I was like, you know what, we can't be married anymore. This is not good for me and my mental health and my son, who was, you know, 13 or 12 at the time. And he just said, okay. He's like, are you serious this time? And I said, yeah.
Oh, because you had had versions of this conversation before then.
Yeah, of course, it's a marriage, not unhealthy marriage. And yeah, and it almost, he left, he went back home to Wisconsin, and I knew I had to go back home at least and, take care of all the stuff. And I I came back and went through the wedding album and all the pieces of a life that we had shared, and I did it alone, and we never had a conversation about it
Okay.
again. And it was it was a hard time and a lonely time, but then, when I can reflect on it and just realize sometimes growth doesn't actually look like something like a tree with its leaves coming out and it's just glorious. Sometimes growth is something that's in the ground and it's happening, but you can't see it. So during that time, I was questioning myself, I was doubting myself, all those things that I had thought I'd grown out of um, just came back in full force. And I really had to work through every day of getting up and living with my decisions and how am I going to move forward.
All
I ended
right.
up staying in Wisconsin.
You stayed in Wisconsin. Did you get a divorce?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Got a divorce. All right.
Yep.
So when you, okay, so here's a question. This might be a terrible question. So if it is and it doesn't make any
There's no
sense, then
terrible questions.
no, it really might be because I'm going to ask you like for so anyway, so if you're like, I don't know. So
Oh, yeah. Okay.
like if you made, I don't know if this was a black and white, like one moment decision, like, oh, I've discovered I was a people pleaser. I'm not doing that anymore. But
Yeah.
um when you became aware that this was a shift you were making, what
Yeah.
were you thinking? If you can remember, this is the part that I'm not sure you have an answer to. What were you maybe thinking would happen as a result of making these changes? Like what was the expectation that you thought would happen? And then is that actually how it played out or not?
Oh, yeah. So my fears were in full force, right? So my fears were everyone was going to hate me. We live in a small town, so I thought everybody was going to judge me and nobody was going to understand because this is the guy that would go rescue kittens out of the tree in the middle of the night. Um, that there was, that I had to face that maybe there really was something wrong with me and now everyone's going to see it.
Yeah,
And that was something I've been running from, right? I didn't want people to ever know my stuff. And that stems from teen mom, right? I didn't want people to see me as a failure.
right. If people see who I really am, they're going to hate me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And staying in this town instead of going to Santa Barbara, which would have been, amazing, actually really helped me because I did have to face all of those people. And, it took a little bit of time. I hid away for a couple months and got my new apartment, kind of started my life. And then I, invited those people for coffee and I didn't trash, anybody, but I really wanted to give them an opportunity to ask me questions and clear the air so that they could see me, like
Yeah.
they could see who I am for the first time.
All right. So your expectation was fears.
Mm,
Then when you invited them over, what really happened? Did some of that come true? Or was
not
it rainbows and unicorns?
not to my face. No,
Not when I was watching. Okay.
not when I was sitting there, but I do um what I gained from it is that everybody has stuff.
Everybody has a story.
And the conversations that I had, there was two women in particular that I was really worried about having coffee with and just sitting down because they were more friends with him than me. And we just had the best conversations because again, we've just all been through stuff, and the more we talk about it, the less shame there is, and the more connected we become.
Yes, 100%. It is terribly scary to share the things about our lives that we don't want other people to know and to face the judgment. But sometimes it is very helpful for us and for the people around us. 100%. And that's not always the case. One of the first times I started thinking about this was when I was talking to a somebody I knew, and their story was apparent in the way they present to the world, right? So, so it was a physical representation. You can't hide that,
Mhm.
and that's a different challenge. No, that's very good. So, how long ago? So, this started when you were 40. How long ago was that?
I'm 40. I'm on the verge of 44.
Oh,
So
so
it's
this is pretty
been,
quick.
yeah, it was a really quick, it was it's like a slow burn to get to the point.
Yeah,
And then once that I hit that light bulb or whatever you want to call it, light switch. I'm staring at a light
sure.
switch. It was just all of the work I'd been doing again that was below the surface that I couldn't really see all the lessons. For a while I was doing affirmations every morning, walking the dog and just listening to affirmations to get into the groove, teaching my brain to have good thoughts about myself. There's all these things I was doing. I was journaling, reading, but it wasn't showing in, it wasn't manifesting in my physical life because I had to make that change. But once I made that big change, a lot of that, a lot of those lessons just started coming uh, into fruition.
Yeah. Like, so you had been building the foundation.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, yeah, he had
That's a
been
great
building the
way,
foundation
dear
there.
way to
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, no, that's very good. So this is a pretty recent thing, but you do have some distance, some time distance between when
Yeah.
you started thinking about this and where you are today.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything when you think back that you wish that younger you, and I guess there's a couple versions of younger you. So like
Mm-hmm.
younger you that was like 38, like before 40, but then maybe also super younger you that was like a teenager, right? What are some things that you wish you had known or had access to at sort of the beginnings of this story when you were unaware of your future?
I think the biggest part that I wish I would have understood, which isn't even a difficult education process, is that, and I think it's more of an American thing, but success isn't what you can buy or what you can see. Success is having love in your heart and gratitude and people around you that love you. And for a long time that I had that wrong. I was chasing what I thought success looked like, and I didn't pay much attention to myself, my needs, or the people I was surrounding myself with.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're the only one. So that does lead into a quick follow-up question, which is, did you grow up in a scenario where you wanted a lot of things you couldn't have?
I did not.
Okay.
Um, I grew up with parents that worked full time that put a lot of importance on things.
Oh, okay. But so that's great. That's great from a storytelling point of view because, you can develop that sense of wanting to buy things when you had lack and also when you had plenty. It's not
Yeah.
actually one to one. So that is very good. So that is very good. So I think this is a very good story. I think it's an important story to share. I think that the listeners will identify with it and really benefit from you taking the time to share it. We're going to do a few more quick questions, but I want to make sure that the listeners know if they want to find you to connect with you. You have a business in Wisconsin and you have a podcast on your own. I'm going to
Yep.
include those details in the show notes and in the email that goes out. But
Thanks.
go ahead and tell people how they can find you.
Yeah, my website is stephshanks.com. That's the best way to, my podcast is on there. I'm working on some retreats and some speaking um, gigs. So that's like the best way to sign up for my newsletter. I send out a newsletter every week about clients that I'm working with, things I'm learning, and all the updates. And then also I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn at Steph Shanks Photography.
Very cool. All right. So now to close this out, I'm going to ask you three questions. These are rapid fire questions. So the idea is that they're just for fun. They're not about people pleasing. They're not about anything that have any consequence. And the idea is just to answer them in like a couple of words, like 2 to 3, just to like to do that, right? All
Yeah.
right. So when you were 8 years old, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Astronaut or veterinarian.
Oh, it's covering all the bases, animals and space. Very good.
Of
Never
course.
actually wanted to go to space. I love pictures from space, but it looks very uncomfortable, I gotta say. Does not look like looks like it's cold. All right, so very good. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Uh, I anything. I like chocolate mint, cookie dough, strawberry cheesecake. It doesn't matter. Just
There's
give it to
no
me.
ice cream you've ever said no to.
No.
Very good. All right. Best advice that one of your parents ever gave you?
That's a hard one. I kind of, my story is a little bit that I've worked really hard to undo all the stories that I've been told. Maybe
Maybe
that's
that's
what
the
they've taught
lesson.
me.
All
Yeah, yeah.
right. Very good. That's it, Stephanie. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening today. I hope that you enjoy the show. And before I go, I want to encourage you to become a bigger part of the conversation. Obviously, subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. listen to more episodes. That'd be great. Obvi again, please write a review and tell your friends about the show. That truly is a great help for getting the show in front of new people. Okay, but more fun for you yourself, head over to imperfectadulting.com and join the email community. You'll get some free stuff right away, and that way you'll begin to get the emails about the podcast. This includes the links for the special offers from the guests, and it's the only way to get that. Also, if you aren't in the mood to listen, I actually include an article directly in those emails. Whee! Now, if you love this and you crave more time with me, Amy, as a coach, a mentor, or just adultier adult, numero uno, check out The Village. If you have a story you want to share with the listeners, I'd love to hear from you. I have an open application. Just let me know you want it. And that's a wrap for today. Until next time, remember, the journey is the destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that, not me. Well, until just now, I did just say it. But what I want you to hear today is that if your adulting journey isn't going the way you expected, that may not mean that you're lost. It may just mean that you're on your way. This is Amy Stone, signing off. The Imperfect Adulting podcast is created and produced by Amy Stone and Amy Says So. Anything expressed on this show is offered as entertainment, and the views of the guests may not always represent the ideas and viewpoints of the host. That's me. Amy does not intend or hold herself out to provide professional advice or recommendations of any kind. In the end, you and you alone need to make those kinds of decisions based on your personal and individual situation, needs, circumstances, and comfort level.